No worries.
And warm welcome to this seminar. I'm going to introduce our respected Dr. Pallab Mozumder and Dr. Bray are going to present on conservation auctions and payments for multiple ecosystems services, a field experiment in Oaxaca, Mexico. We are aware that CIMMYT, we're doing a number of things. So I'm sure there were many overlapping between the presentation. Dr. Pallab Mozumder is a professor with a joint appointment in the Department of Earth and Environment and the Department of Economics at Florida International University, USA. Dr. David Bray is also a professor in the same department, and he has very interesting work experience. He's working and based in Mexico for many years. Worked extensively in Argentina.
Well, thank you everybody for coming and attending this session, and thank you so much for Pallab and all the support staffs, and really appreciate your help in arranging this event and so on. We are very excited to come here to give a presentation on our work. Conservation auctions and payment for I'll primarily talk a few minutes, and if there is any questions or concerns, David Bray, who is here, colleague of mine, we are working on this project for a while, and he's gonna come back and answer any clarifying issues and so on. So we started this work a few years ago with one of our graduate student, Eric Van Vliet. He, did a lot of work, and he helped us a good deal in getting the field work in Oaxaca, and then we kept, working on it and so on. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started, and I will talk about like a half an hour or so. You can stop me in the middle if you want to, but also you can have a Q&A session at the end. So, let's see where my slides are not moving. I think I need help from Lopez. Yeah, sorry, the slides are not moving. Okay, good. So let me give you a little bit of background. Mexico has one of the most comprehensive payment for ecosystem services program in a global comparison. They started their program in a while ago, almost 2 decades, I would say. And here we are trying to see how can we modify the existing program, expand it, to respond to a lot of environmental challenges that we are dealing with. So basically, we are trying to test how feasible is to implement conservation auction program that we see in the US, in Australia, and lately many other Latin American countries. They are showing interest to see if is it feasible to implement these types of program. So one of the PES program we have in Mexico is payment for hydrological service, where basically the people who live in forested communities, they get paid for conservation activities. And we are primarily interested about, can we implement an auction mechanism which will allow to more participatory, market-driven framework to expand this program. And so we wanted to see if it's feasible. And then we wanted to see a few other programs tried around the world. Nicaragua's silvopastoral program, which basically planting trees in the pasture land. Indonesia's land erosion control program in the coffee land. And also in other parts of Mexico, they have a voluntary carbon forestry program in the Chiapas. And we wanted to see if auction mechanism would work in these cases. So we wanted to see, if we can do our field work in communities that we are familiar with. So we have my colleague and friend David Bray here. He's working on community forestry throughout his career. And we figured that, it will be much easier for us to implement in Oaxaca. And there's a good deal of, communities that are participating in this, conservation program payment for hydrological services. So we ended up in picking up 8 villages from 5 these communities. I'll show you some maps. You can see the location of these communities and so on. And we conducted field work in one of the summer time, and we are aware of the challenges, and so we picked up these villages so we have better resources to deal with the challenges. So in the Mexican context, 100% of the forests are managed as a community property. So you have to just our in our state, almost more than 1,500 registered right holders. They are participating in a good deal of conservation program. Almost 78 to 90% land as a forest cover, and they receive some sort of PS. And you can see these communities that are, some are bigger, some are smaller, and we try to get a good mix of communities to see if in some cases is it more easier or more difficult to implement and so on. So this table will give you a snapshot of these communities and their land areas, right holders, land size per right holders, extent of hectares that are forested, percentage of forest land, percentage under PES program, and also total montane cloud forest. We'll explain why we are looking into that as a separate, because in the PES, payment for environmental service, that qualified for a different payment structure, given their improved higher contribution to the ecosystem services. So as you can see, these communities, percentage of PES, if you observe, there is a communities that doesn't participate, and also almost 58-60% participation. Then you have in between cases and so on. Okay, so moving to the next slide, you see the major activities in these communities. 88% are milk agriculture, and basically major activities are corn, cattle, and coffee. 20% of people live there, they own cattle. Average ownership 9 cattle, average size of pasture is 2.86 hectares. 81% leave trees in the pasture land, 41% maintain forest plant in pasture. So these numbers are relevant to our payment for ecosystem service package that we are asking to participate and so on. As you see, almost 80% people are coffee farmers, 1.798 hectares average per coffee farmer. 39% do some erosion control practices in their coffee land. Migration also another major activities. 42.86% participated in migrated at some point, so they go back. Some of the folks that we studied, they go back and forth depending on other agricultural returns from other agricultural practice. So, for example, if coffee price goes down, we have seen like a increased rate of migration more to the US and so on. And in terms of their preferences in participating in these PS programs and expanding into some extent, they are very interested, and 80% of the people feel like they don't desire more payments. A higher incentive should be paid for the active work they do for environment and so on. So we are going to implement the conservation action in these communities. But before we start the details of our study, I wanted to talk about this payment for a PES program in a little broader context. So one, and these farmers and community members that live in the forest, and in Mexico, most of the land is owned by communities as a group and so on, and they participate in this program as a group. So Mexico makes a unique case. Land ownership is not private, but it's not exactly that case. There is a range of some lands are more public, some lands are less public. So coffee land probably has a little more private characteristics. Conservation land probably has a more public characteristics and so on. So that's one aspect of people who are providing the service. People who are paying for the service, who are they? Where their money coming from, and so on. And this PES program was going on for more than almost 2 decades now, and they have quite a mix of funding sources. World Bank is one of the participants. Wildlife, WWF is a pretty major contributor to this program. I think some of the major corporate donors, I think the Mexican billionaire Carlos Slim, time to time he contributed to this, and also different companies like beer producing companies, Corona, Negro Modelo, they participate and contribute to this. More importantly, in a more decentralized fashion, people who are living in the Mexico City pay their water bill. From that water bill, a small tiny piece of it comes to and if you want to continue and so on. And so we are I think we got some problem here. reduce the bid. In carbon forestry, communication did increase the bid. So our understanding, our way to explain erosion control, probably if these coffee farmers already doing many of these activities and so on, and they thought after communicating, they thought they probably can provide these services at a lower price. On the other hand, carbon forestry, there is a global demand for carbon markets and so on. A lot of community NGOs and so on, they go to Oaxaca, try to have them signed up for different contract and so on from the US, the Europe. So there is a growing demand for these types of services, and they probably think like they can get higher prices for similar contract. Oh, sorry, it's frozen again and it's not moving. So here is basically some comparison of our bid, and we are comparing, PS communication, no communication, mode structure, the BDM price, whether the auction got accepted again. Remember, the contract get accepted only their price, the one that they pick is equal or smaller than the randomly generated price, but it gets sold at the price that BDM generates. So they are better off in selling the things. Even their price is lower or equal, they get the price that generated by the BDM auction. You can we can compare some of the. So this is first column shows for this existing program how much it cost, and then what is our experiment bid generated that price. Under communication and no communication, there is some variation, as I mentioned. The last column shows for each category the BDM. If we implement this BDM auction mechanism, how much it will cost, and you can see the comparison for existing PS program, silvopastoral, coffee erosion, carbon forestry. So basically, you can see if today Mexico decides to implement their payment for hydrological service through an auction mechanism, it will cost them a little more money. So basically, you can see the communities that they said, they desire more payment. You can see the reflection of that. If you are opening it for auction and the bid they will submit and so on, it will cost them a little more. On the other hand, those three new programs that we are trying to expand, silvopastoral, coffee erosion, and carbon forestry, you can see, the last bar is smaller than the first bar. So which means it will cost less than if we do it, take it or leave it mechanism. So there are some, gains and losses to try out the BDM program. Anyway, so this is one part of that allows us to compare these 4 different ecosystem services, which one will cost less, which one will cost more, if we implement this program through auction mechanism. One of the things, we learned, and people who are, interested or involved into these activities, it's a lot of, transaction cost, what in economics we talk about, to implement these programs, to, make it work and so on, dealing with farmers on a regular basis, to make them, they understand the process and so on. So it's a good deal of bureaucracy and, administratively is quite burdensome. So what we are thinking about, once set up the mechanism, once the mechanism is working and running, can we work for bundling with other system services? So if we are running separately, you have to run separate programs, separate payment structure, separate agents, so on, which be quite a bit of resource intensive and slow and so on. So you're trying to see, is there a way to bundle this mechanism? Would that be work? If you bundle like a few services into the contract package and so on. So so we're designing some sort of conservation game if they will coordinate if we bundle separate ecosystem services package. So let's see. So for bundling purposes, so what we are doing, we are designing some treatment. In the first treatment, where we give 2 land use decision to the participant, to these farmers, they can decide the land use, either pasture or conservation. And they make several decisions on these things and keep doing conservation or keep doing pasture. And the way they do it in this framed field experiment, they show different card, blue for conservation, yellow card for pasture. That's how they report their land use decision. And also, their payoff, there is some trade-off. So if you do more pasture, you probably benefited individually because it brings higher returns in the short run. But as a group, because it has some negative externality, if you do a lot of pasture, your soil quality will go down and so on, which will reflect in the long-term productivity. So in the design, we made some trade-off between individual versus group payoff, and also trying to replicate the nature and characteristics of these ecosystem services, and so on. So if you keep doing pasture, you start high, but over time you will get lower and lower returns because over time those land will be degraded and so on, and you get less and less out of those land as a cattle farming and so on. On the other hand, conservation starts from low, but if you keep doing it conservation over time, you may qualify for other payment for ecosystem services. So if you do conservation for a certain period, assumption is that your tree might be bigger, they might provide wildlife habitat, you may qualify for biodiversity-based ecosystem service. If your tree even bigger, it can store a significant amount of carbon and so on, you may qualify for carbon storage and so on. That's ecosystem services. So those kind of ideas we are trying to play within the design framework and see if it will work. So treatment 2, in the treatment 1, basically they decide whether to go for pasture or go to conservation. In the treatment 2, basically, this is a group of 4 people are participating in the group. We say if collectively they make 10 conservation decisions, they qualify for an additional PS for carbon sequestration. So assumption is that they need conservation for a long. In each round we are explaining it. Think about it's like a 1 year. So you are into contract, you can make the land use decision this way. And if you keep doing like a 10 decision collectively in the 4 people group, you will qualify for a different PS program that you will get additional incentives and so on. On the other hand, the payment for PS program will go down if they do consecutive 10 pasture decision and prior to 10 conservation decision. That will PS payment will go and so on. And the rationale is that loss of forest cover as you expand pasture and loss of soil and so on. Our treatment brought another layer to it. So if they do 20 collective decisions a group for conservation, you qualify for another PES program, which is biodiversity. So you probably have a well-grown forested land where you can provide habitat for wildlife and so on. So you qualify for a different payment, additional payments and so on. So we are basically playing these 3 ecosystem services: hydrological, carbon storage, and biodiversity. And the way you design, you do conservation for a while, your payment gets an extra kick. If you do conservation for a longer while, you get an additional, but it's in the part of the same program. We just adding bells and whistles to it, so you can implement it, with less resources and less bureaucracy and so on. Similar thing, the pasture. If you keep doing pasture, it will, in the beginning, it will generate higher individual payups, but over time, your payment for ecosystem service will go down and down as you keep doing these things, because it's not provide the environmental service that we are interested in. In the 4th treatment, basically, we bring it to the treatment 1. We just strip off all the layers that we added and bring it to the very basic structure that we have, even for hydrological service. You only have decisions, land use decision, pasture or conservation, and to see if we strip out some of this incentive structure, do the farmers come back to, do they also, leave all these activities that they are participating, or there are some, effect, even we are not paying them, they're still provide those. There are many programs for this, once you develop the habit of doing certain things, even you're not getting paid for those things, you keep doing things because you understand the benefit of those activities in a private setup and public setup. So even you are not getting paid, and that's a good factor when you are trying to make this program sustainable. You cannot expect all the time you're going to get aid money or support money and so on. What happens? Funding dries up and so on. Can you make it sustainable and so on? By the way, Mexican program is quite sustainable. It's going for almost 20 years, and they collect funds from many different sources: water utility payers, billionaires, World Wildlife Fund, World Bank, Corona, and so on. So it's a quite diversified portfolio. So here, yes, I can show you that, so the way the tree, so treatment 1, hydrological service, pasture and conservation; treatment 2, hydrological service plus carbon. People who have to participate as a group and collective conservation, and then it will get a kick in for additional payment. if you do 10 pasture before 10 conservation, your payment will go down and so on. So it has a tree. And then after 10, if you do conservation, you'll get another kick for payment for carbon and payment for biodiversity and so on. I'll show you how the payment table works. Well, this is the table that they played with and so on. So you can see in the session one, if you're doing conservation, let's look at the P2. C2 means 2 decision is pasture and C2 means 2 decision is conservation. And as pasture gives higher return, so you see a payoff, total payoff is $1,500 on the first table. Basically 2 rounds of pasture, $1,000, 2 rounds of conservation generates $500 plus $1,000, $1,500 and so on. But as you go down, you can see the 10 conservation land, they will get, instead of $250, in the same P2, C2 category, they will get $350 per hectare per year. And if they do 10 pasture, it will reduce to $150 per hectare per year. So that's how we are stacking bundling in the program. And that's what the innovation thing brought into the PEF design framework. So here, basically in the session 3, we are now bundling 3 different things. Start with hydrological. If you do 10 conservation, you qualify for, the next one, which is the biodiversity, and you do next one. Yes. Second layer is the carbon. Third layer is the biodiversity. So you can see start 50, 350, and then you keep doing conservation, you get 450 and so on. On the other hand, if you keep doing pasture, start with 250, PS program goes 150 and then 50. So you get that sequential increment or decrement in the PS program. So now the question is, do they like it? Do they have more money? Does it? You think, probably you're offering more money, why they wouldn't sign up for it? Well, that's not exactly what we find. Well, this shows like a snapshot of our raw data. But here it shows that the most preferred option when we are comparing the score between across treatment 1, treatment 2, treatment 3, treatment 4, the most preferred, treatment was treatment 2, where we combine 2 ecosystem services, hydrological plus carbon. They like that much more. Well, why they are not picking like a third one? We are offering them more service, more money and more services and so on. That's a carbon. That's biodiversity and so on. So you have to enter into the contract much more longer duration. You have to commit to keep certain plants and trees for a much longer duration. So it's a much more longer commitment. And they probably think, it's probably not a good idea to get into that much longer commitment and so on. They wanted to go trial and error process and so on. Now, when we removed all that, we came back to so number 1 and number 4 in economic incentive in action is pretty similar. But we see a little higher, so there is some remnants effect from, those treatment 2 and treatment 3, basically implying that some people, even you are not paying them extra, some people are doing those kind of activities anyway. That's an additional gain that you're getting the you're not paying for it. Anyway, for our findings, as we mentioned, randomly selected participants in these villages allowed them to communicate with their peers and participate in several different sessions. First is the conservation auction. Second one is the bundling multiple ecosystem services. And our results suggest that participants understood the instrument, understood the mechanism, and there is significant difference we can see across their bidding structure that they submitted for erosion control, silvopastoral, carbon forestry practice, and also they will give us a confidence that they are following the activities that we are asking, and we are also responding payment in a different way depending on what you are asking to do and so on. Average participants, they demand a higher willingness to pay compared to what they are getting paid now. Under bundling scheme, we tried two different services, single, twice, 2 and 3 ecosystem services. And more money doesn't necessarily, convince them to participate and provide more ecosystem service. They like 2 services bundling rather than 3 and so on. So that might be an interesting, important lesson to learn when you're trying to bundle different services and so on. There are some threshold or scale issue that you can, to some extent, you have to stop and cannot do any more bundling and so on. So as I mentioned, bundling 2 services, hydrological and carbon, are more preferred than bundling 3, which included biodiversity and so on. So during the creation of PES program in Mexico, they talk about, it can, because it's more economically efficient. Also, it allows participants. So it's a most participatory. They are submitting their bid, their preference is reflected. They can see what they got accepted or did not get accepted. So there are some transparency into the system and more participation, and also you get the gains from economic institution. And also, if there is enough variation in the land quality characteristics, some land probably more valuable conservation, some land more, not less. So under current situation, take it or leave it, it doesn't allow you to collect the rent from that variations. So information, even as a forest service, I think it's CONOFOR in Mexico, they don't know what's the quality of this land in terms of providing the conservation attributes. But by allowing them to participate in this auction mechanism, you are allowing them, so highly conservation land, their willingness to accept it probably will be higher, or critical land. Now they have just 2 layers, cloud forest versus regular forest and so on. But here you're giving a range of bid, and you can separate a different class of ecosystem services, different characteristics of quality and so on, and allowing that will bring more economic efficiency and so on. So preliminary results imply that Mexico's PES program will be more expensive under current conservation, just the PES hydrological service if you want to implement. But for other new programs, it will cost less. So we can think about those things and so on. And in general, communities are really interested in a much more diverse portfolio. They're more interested in participating in additional ecosystem services. And so that gives us some, some ideas to how can expand, to what extent we bundle, and so on. So that's pretty much. I have any questions, comments, I really appreciate. And again, thanks for coming in and attending this program. So in the chat, I can see there are some messages. Is there a question? It says no sound. So basically, I guess they did not hear, so I'm not sure how they're going to ask questions. But that's in like a 20 minutes earlier. So I think we figured that out, fixed that problem. But anyway, so if anybody wants to ask any questions, you can either put it in the chat box, or I think Simon has a question here. Yes, please.
Yeah, I have a question. So there's the outdoor maintenance of forest.
Yes.
However, they also periodically cut down forests so they move. So how does that factor into the conservation? Is that related to the unwillingness to long term?
So the forest, existing forest, basically the payment is not to clear cut the forest. So you can clear cut and you can do coffee or corn or other things and so on. But even if you do coffee and corn, there are other programs. Can you do something for land erosion control, or if you do have pasture, can you do something for planting trees in those clear cut land and so on? But primarily is to what is there already to stop deforestation. So you're getting paid, or you can say, well, you're getting paid for doing nothing. Not really. They have the option to cut them tree and convert it to timbers and other products and so on. So they're giving up that option, and we are asking how much compensation you are going to ask for that action. That's basically it.
Yeah, just a comment on the Mexican PES program. And then, this is interesting because at the beginning of the program, it's, it started in 2002, 2003. They actually had at least 3 different payments. One was hydrological services, one was carbon, one was biodiversity. I'm pretty sure, they're completely separate. So the administrators of the program, basis of their judgment about the characteristics of the parcel of the farm would, decide whether to get one or the other. So I think I'm pretty sure they explicitly did not allow bundling. It would have been seen as like dump dipping.
Yes.
Then around 2000, I think maybe Calderon, 2006, 2007, 2008, they eliminated carbon and biodiversity, and it was only for hydrological. So I don't know why they did that. Basis, but yeah, I think I'm sure they never considered bundling. In part because they say they're a bit more expensive, the higher payments to the
Yes.
producers. So yeah, certainly never consider. You would have, problems with sort of equity issues where you're giving. Okay, so yeah, you assume you have a producer who has high carbon value, high biodiversity value, high hydrological services value by some criteria. You have a lot more money.
Yes.
Yeah, and so, for fairness, the political issues, fairness.
Yeah,
Whatever.
Yeah, it's an efficiency versus an equity issue. But here the argument is that if your land provides a lot of ecosystem services, you should get paid more. We want to make conservation profitable activities. So it should compete with other land use decisions, pasture and other decisions. So if you're providing old growth forest, new growth forest should not be compensated at the same rate. You should ask for more money. That's the whole point. We want to make conservation more profitable. On the other hand, land that are not providing enough conservation service, very flat land, doesn't have a lot of ecological significance and so on, they should not get paid at the same level. So if equity issue will come in, but there is always a mechanism that economists know to compensate for fairness issue. If you think, no, this household is, economically in a disadvantaged condition and so on, you can add subsidy component and so on. And so we can definitely look into those. But before I get into other things, I wanted to show you some of the picture of our field work. So you can see, these people are reading our script. When I asked our research assistant, which is primarily Eric, and I said, how is it going and so on, he sent me a note that next time you send me more glasses, eyeglasses. They're squinting their eyes to read the script. So yeah, so something we learned, we should allow more eyeglasses because a lot of people are, eyesight is not very. But anyway, they participated with great deal of interest and so on. So you can see their BDM participating in the BDM mechanism. They are making the land use decision with the blue card and yellow card and so on. And you can see these 4 group dynamics going on. And at the end, this is real money. We paid them depending on their decisions and so on. We really paid them, and they are collecting money. So it's an economic experiment. We wanted to make sure that it's incentive compatible and people who made more money got paid at the end and so on and so forth. But anyway, we will be happy to, anybody is interested in this and scale it up in a different ways and so on. Trying it out, other communities will be, probably will bring, additional, challenges and so on. But yeah, payment for environmental service, again, coming back to David's discussion point, some people think, okay, if we allow them to participate multiple services, hydrological services, remember, payment for hydrological service, you're keeping the watershed healthy. So it provides the hydrological, good quality water and at different points and different locations and so on. But then forest, yes, that forest, if grows well grown, probably providing wildlife habitat and so on. And that's providing carbon storage and so on. But these are, ecosystem market is still very immature and so on. But it's getting to a point that can you ask 5 different things and just make one payment? The point is, no, it should be specific, defined, and so on. And we should have mechanism too. If somebody is making additional contribution or their land is making additional contribution, there should be a mechanism to ask for more incentive or more payment and so on. Anyway, so that's pretty much the final point. Let's see, is there any other comments from the online audience?
I have actually when you spend you take up all the markets and still the tenant is very high.
Yes, so we explain the way we call it habit formation. So when people get used to doing certain things and they understand the benefit of it. So for example, let's say your health insurance company said, well, if you walk every day for an hour, your premium will go down by 10%. And after a year, you say, no, we cannot give you that benefit because we don't have that kind of, funding or whatever is they try to take. But by that time, you say, well, when I walk, my blood sugar goes down, my blood pressure is, doing well, and so on. So you realize that, one objective of the incentive is that to make you familiar with the good behavior. So even if you took the formal incentive, you probably understood what it does and what it does not, what's the problems, what's the prospects, and so on. Some people think it's a good idea to just continue behaving in that way and so on, keep conserving or not, and so on. So that's how it probably showing those things and so on.
This is also the signal that these things are really beneficial.
Yes. Yeah, so even we take up the formal incentive, think about keep conserving means if there's a less erosion in the coffee land, probably they can retain coffee plant longer time or their coffee productivity goes up. So there are some private benefits. Private benefits mean at that scale and so on. If they are, they have an old growth forest and so on, probably they can retain the soil much longer and so on. So there are many benefits. They can see those types of things and so on. Anyway, so these are the, much more recent things that we are exploring, bringing economic tools and techniques, solving environmental problems. Different types of markets we see, auction, eBay auction, and so on. So people are thinking, okay, can we bring it in the field to try out these things? And so that's motivation for us to try out these things. And we had a lot of fun, work on this project and so on. And at some point, we'll probably wrap it up and publish this paper, but it's going for a while. And sure.
I asked the audience to input.
Yes. Okay, good.
You are done, right?
Yes. So I think,
thank you for the follow-up and
thank you everybody on online and offline for this opportunity to come here and present at CIMMYT. We really enjoyed that drive and giving the presentation, and we'll see you around now.
thank you very much, Dr. Pallab David, for this excellent presentation. Honestly, I enjoyed personally this presentation. This is really useful. And the finding is that even if we take out the incentive, some of the farmers will continue this practice. This is really great. It shows the sustainability of the project, actually. And then I'm sorry that there is not much audience show up. And now CIMMYT is coming back to the normal, from the new normal to normal situation. That's why. Otherwise, I'm sure that the person would be interested. So thank you very much for taking our invitation and coming here and for your presentation. We enjoyed it. And thank you all. Thank you very much.
Right?